Welcome to the Ascends at Boston Avenue podcast. My name is Philip Boone, and I use he, him, his pronouns.
And I'm Caitlin Drake. I use female pronouns, she, her, hers.
Before we begin, I'd like to state that the views represented in this podcast are those of the individuals in this conversation and not the official position of Boston Avenue United Methodist Church. We are recording this podcast remotely from our individual homes during the COVID-19 pandemic, as we practice physical distancing as a church community. When the decision was made in March to close the church building in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we knew that our ministries would have to look different. Even though the building is closed, the church is still open, active, and engaged. What does a dispersed church or a church outside a building look like? This is the second in a three-part series talking with ministers and staff members of Boston Avenue UMC to discuss the ways they have been able to adapt, innovate, and change ministry during this time. Our guests today are the Director of Music Ministries, Joel Panciera, Director of Welcoming, Belynda Clanton, and Reverend Sara Pugh Montgomery. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
So to start with, Joel, one of our core values at Boston Avenue is that we cultivate music, arts, and architecture as a means of experiencing God. And yet we also know that singing and many of our musical activities may be even more dangerous in this COVID-19 era than just gathering in person. What did you do in our music ministries to persist with this core value while still upholding COVID-19 precaution?
This is Joel, he, him, his. I have to be honest, at first it's hard not to feel like God is targeting you when your ministry is especially dangerous. Never in my wildest dreams had I ever imagined that singing would be such a dangerous thing, but of course it is. And so we had to make a very abrupt change, as all areas did, of course. In particular, I think so much of the music ministry program is focused on supporting worship and enriching worship that our first priority was to try to figure out how do we change worship if it's too dangerous for people to be all together in one room, to sing and to spread the particulates in their lungs to each other. How do we have worship? And thinking back on that time, everyone's heads were spinning. And I think you all were there. That first Sunday, we had a little mini broadcast, and our first idea was, well, we'll have church the same basic way, except we won't have choirs, and we'll have a representative group of about 15 or 20 people to be the congregation to sing. And that was kind of an interim step. But of course, number one, it wasn't as safe, I think, as it could have been. And number two, it just felt like 15 people could never approximate over 1,000 people singing. And so it was kind of a limp, unsatisfactory solution. But it was our initial step. And I don't think any one person can take credit for it, but David and I and the TV crew and everyone on staff put our brains together. And it seemed to us, since we had to give up worshiping together in the same room, we needed to focus on, okay, what would the experience be like for people watching in their home on TV or doing the internet broadcast? And number one, I should stop and say, we are so grateful that we have this library broadcast that we've had for many, many, many years, because that enabled us to do so many things. It opened up the world of possibilities that if we had not had that, we would have been really in a world of hurt. So anyway, as we were getting together, we decided to focus on blending modern day prayers and liturgies and faces and messages, of course, which this time people were all really struggling with making sense of, in theological ways. How do we integrate our devotional life and our real life? And so we need that. But of course, because music and our traditions of sharing our faith through music involves lots of people, we decided to blend. So we had these recordings, video recordings of individual hymns or anthems that are in our library. So for me personally, the first big job was I felt like a librarian, like an archivist. I had to go back through all years and I made lists and lists and lists, because I still didn't want to give up the idea that the hymns and the anthem should in some way support what David is going to preach about and what this theme for the service is. But in order to do that, it would take hours just to find one hymn that might be good. And it's okay. So in 2017, on February 16th, the middle hymn was, so a big part of those early months was just archiving everything, putting them in lists, and then making them accessible. So we could then put together a service that has these video components and the live components. And of course, our TV crew has been wonderful. Jeff Pasco in particular, in his kind of brilliant way of weaving them together, so much so that apparently people occasionally do call in and they don't even notice that we go from a live shot to a shot taken pre-pandemic, because it's so seamless. Although folks inquire, we talk every week online, of course, about, the different hairdos that, at one point their hair is like this and then it's like that, and that's kind of fun. So there are lots of other fun things, and more poignant things too are, we've lost people, of course, like for instance, a spouse who has suffered a loss. Every time we see these people either in choir or out in the congregation that are beloved, at first, I think the planners, we were worried about that. But all of the feedback I've gotten from the people who were most close to the one who was lost have expressed great joy and appreciation for being able to see their loved one. So there are all these added layers of beauty and love and expressions of devotion that were unanticipated, that we're now kind of experiencing together. Another thing, we started with all videoed anthems, but then starting in the summer, we started adding more live anthems or recently recorded. And almost every Sunday now, there's a recent recording as well as maybe an older recording. And we're gonna amp that up even more in the future. So in the fall, there will be, like for instance, All Saints Sunday, the first Sunday of November, will be a lot of music, of small ensembles. We're gonna have some Tulsa symphony players come, and so there'll be a little bit more elaborate kind of music with readers. And the handbell choirs started last night, so we'll have smaller ensembles of instruments and voices that will be either taped or live to kind of keep it fresh, and keep our people involved. So we're finding new and creative ways to make it work.
Sara, you're over our missions activities. Mission work is an important part of our spiritual lives together at Boston Avenue. Yet many of our regular mission activities were unsafe with COVID-19. Did missions just stop, or did they keep going in a different way?
This is Sara, and I use the female pronouns, she, her, hers. And I love how you kind of sent me this nice little softball throw so that I can hit out of the park. We'd never stopped. And so there were obviously a lot of things that we couldn't do. A lot of parts of our mission activities were around feeding and around meals together. It was also, without having access and the ability to be able to gather together in a building and be able to do mission work together was a huge hindrance. So what we started to do then as a mission leadership team, a group of us kind of got together once a week, and we would think about some activities that folks could do while they were at home. So when we were initially quarantined, like fully quarantined, we kind of had some activities that folks could do at home, being able to write one another and have, pals and buddies that way, being able to support our boroughs teachers and kind of send them some words of encouragement, being able to sign up to help deliver groceries, because a lot of folks that are unable to be able to get out, that was a hard part for them if they were in the really high vulnerable categories. And then as things started to kind of open up a little bit more, we continued to meet as a leadership team and just kind of kept our eyes and ears open to what was going on, which helped to then that we were able to see and to hear about the ministry that's been going on at Vernon AME, which is one of our partner churches that we work with. And so they are feeding folks and have been doing that from the beginning, from when everything closed down. And so instead of us kind of picking up and starting a new ministry here it was great because we were able to be a part of a ministry that was going on somewhere else and be able to partner with somebody within that. Throughout the rest of the summer, we've kind of been able to continue to work with our partner mission organizations, and again, to find ways to be able to still do mission work that was safe. So, such as people being able to put together birthday baskets for families at the Lindsay house, or, baskets of love that had many different needs and supplies that folks that are part of the Exodus House, which is our criminal justice and mercy ministry program, that they wouldn't be able to purchase with their food stamps. And so cleaning supplies and, different things like that. And, and continuing to be able to volunteer over at Vernon, and also being able to, pick up some other partnerships with our Cooks and Mission Center, and being able to gather some of the items for the snack and packs and pieces for school starting back up, so missions is still happening. It's just not centered in this building, but also a beautiful part of being able to think of missions really getting outside of the building rather than being grounded within this space. So that was a huge pivot, and has continued to be a huge pivot for our congregation to kind of think of that whole idea of, the church has left the building, which was a big kind of phrase a couple of years ago, but it's truly what happened within our missions activities.
Belynda, you've been deeply involved in our welcoming work. How has that changed during the pandemic?
This is Belynda, and I use pronouns she, her, hers. Well, as you might imagine, it has been a huge change for the church, because what we do as a church is welcome people to come through the doors and experience all the wonderful things that Boston Avenue has to offer. And now we just have one small problem, and that is that we can't open the doors. So we have to shift, and we build on what we know. And what we know is that there are thousands. It's hard to know the numbers, but we do have times at holidays like Easter when we record attendance of 8,000 people. So I still feel like that's probably just the tip of the iceberg. So we knew all those people were there. But now we had the opportunity to try to find out exactly who those people are. Before, we had always been focused on the people entering the building, and what time was left over, we would focus on people watching in virtual means and through Channel 8 TV. But now we had the opportunity to spend all of our time focused on everybody who was watching virtually. What we learned was we get reports every week, and what we see on those reports time after time after time are people's comments about the ministry of this church, Reverend Wiggs and all the pastors here. People just rave about they feel God speaking to them through the sermons and the word and the scriptures that are read. The second thing is the music. Over and over, people saying how they feel moved and inspired. What beautiful music. We have so many talented people willing to share their talents at the church and provide music and instrumentals, even when they can't sing, or sing in new ways that are recorded. And people appreciate that and notice it. And so building on those connections with people, we just started making phone calls. Now, in this digital age, we rely so much on text and email, but it's kind of like we all still like to get a package in the mail. Don't you like to get a package in the mail? So somehow, if we pick that phone up and make that call, and people hear a real voice someone who cares, and we're just saying we just called to check on you and see how you were doing. And thank you for letting us know that you registered your attendance. And the response has just been overwhelming. Boston Avenue truly lives what it says, in that we believe every person is a beloved child of God. That means we're worshiping with people who are Baptist, Episcopal, disciples. They all come to Boston Avenue when, for whatever reason, maybe their church is closed. We've had people say, well, these aren't really unprecedented times. We've had pandemics before. But what is unprecedented about this time is that it's the first time it's ever required that churches closed. Not even world wars have required churches to close. So in that way, we are all in this together. And as Reverend Weeks says, we've got to find the good in this and how God is reaching out to welcome people. He is bigger than any problem, and we can still bring those people into the church. So we've met some wonderful folks that we would have never had the opportunity to meet before. I kind of like to say, what are all the reasons that people would prefer to watch on TV? And there's lots of them. Yes, it's easier, and you don't have to put on makeup or a suit or anything like that. But there are a lot of people who, for health reasons, either long-term or short-term, they may be disabled. They maybe are caretakers. So I'm going to sit with someone and we're going to watch church together. Families even gathering through our worship service when they're in other countries or other states, but we all join together to watch church, and then we had something in common to discuss after that. I've also found, sadly, that some people maybe watch because they don't feel like they are good enough or that they are accepted by the church. So I can distance myself from you in that way. So we find a lot of isolated people. In particular, one woman said to me, when I asked her if she had a church home, she said, I've been so far away from the church that you wouldn't want me there. And I assured her that she was welcome at Boston Avenue and that we would love to have her as a part of our church. And it's just been wonderful to see her grow in her faith and in her participation with the church. And, you know, people, even though they may not ever be able to come and worship with us on a Sunday, they are engaging, they're getting involved in some of our classes, they're coming to Sunday school, they're writing letters to the staff. They appreciate over and over what this church has been able to offer them. And people of other denominations, you know, they say, the other day a family said to me, I don't know what we would have done because their church can no longer come to see them. And she said, if we hadn't had Boston Avenue, I truly don't know what we would have done. So this church is a living witness to mission, to the beauty that they bring into people's lives. It's just life-changing, and we continue to reach out. We're blessed that in the time the church is closed, we've added 90 new members to our church, and that has been phenomenal. And we just want that number to continue to grow. Even when the church opens, we want to keep that momentum up and find, it's made us be creative. So God has been at work in all of this.
I love what Belynda said. This is Sara again. And I was just loving what Belynda was saying, especially about sort of why people might worship at home. And this whole time of being at home has also reminded me kind of the beginning of the church, which began in homes and in houses, and that was where folks met to be able to worship. So it's really, even as a pastor, it's been a really fascinating theological framework and to look at it in that manner about how are we kind of returning back even to our roots and what's the movement going to look like beyond that as well. So this whole idea of, that house church isn't abnormal, it's actually foundational. And that's a beautiful thing that Belynda was just mentioning about some wonderful ways that is a blessing for many folks.
I told Reverend Wiggs, I said, the picture in my mind was the music and the ministry of Boston Avenue. People are drawn to it. And I said, it's like a boat, and all the nets, all the fish are coming into the nets. And we just need to pull those people into the boat. And that's the image that we've been using, because they're being drawn here for so many reasons. But I really believe it's because they find the Spirit of God alive and well in this special place.
And I was just talking to someone the other day about how, as a child, we learned the song, "We Are the Church." And it has, the church is not a building, the church is not a steeple, it's not a resting place, the church is the people. And you learn that as a child, and you kind of get it ingrained, but this is really showing us that that's true. And it's like, it's trying to live out the song that we learned as children.
So kind of related to that, Philip, I think for a lot of people, church is about people. It's about those interpersonal connections with others. It's about community. For so many folks, it's opportunities to connect with other people, be part of that community, and that's often deepened by physical proximity. So that's a challenge for us right now. I think about our choirs, for example. Singing together is obviously about the music, but it's also about being part of a community and being part of church with other people. So how has your specific area, Joel, Sarah, Belynda, whoever wants to chime in, how have you adapted to meet that community?
We started just via emails, really, and making videos and sharing those videos. But that's not interactive. And so we started, even though a number of our folks are still kind of learning about technology and Zoom and some of the other things, we started weekly Zoom sessions for every person in the music family, the music ministry, either choir members, handbells, in the instrumentalists, or parents of choristers, are invited to participate in a weekly session where we share how things are going. I always have a particular composer to focus on, and we have little fun, little get to know you kinds of conversations, but a way for maintaining the community, just as you said beautifully, Caitlin, about the importance of the connections, and then also to link it with music. That's really important. I've also just enjoyed, because I don't have to plan a lot of rehearsals, I've enjoyed teaching classes. So Sunday school classes, the discipleship classes. I actually have one, if I could plug it right now, that'd be great. I have one coming up in October called A Singing Faith, that our tutti time, which I'm calling our music fellowship time that I talked about before. We're going to include that, but open it up to everyone who would like to participate. It will have a small in-person component and then an online component. It'll be a hybrid of both. And we're going to look at the vast kind of sweep of time and how old things are new and how new things are based on old, and also how so much of our theology and our liturgy are informed by what's happening in Asia or Africa or South America, and how global our tradition is. It makes me proud to be a Methodist. So all those things will be discussed.
Yeah, this is Sarah. I think one of the beauties of Zoom, which is a platform that many folks have been having to learn, including myself, even though I'm 39, it's still something I had no idea about. But one of the beauties of that is actually creating a space for, even as Belynda was sharing with us about all those new folks that have been coming into the church, that they've been able to find different outlets of community, even though they've joined in the midst of this dispersed time. And I was talking with one of those new members the other day. She had just had surgery, and so we had a couple of us had brought her some food to be able to share after her surgery and kind of support her in that. And as I was talking with her, I had invited her to the Sunday school class that my husband's a part of. And, she had said she had just been in pub theology with Reverend Jen the night before. And, and she looked at me and she said, Reverend Sarah, she said, these are things I never would have done if we had actually been in person, because I am so shy and so socially anxious that to reach out in this way at a big church in an in-person way to come and join a group, she said, I never would have done that. So this opportunity, and as an extrovert, my brain was just like exploding. So I'm like, say what? But I always have to remind myself, that the church and the world is created for extroverts. And that right now, this pandemic is really opening up spaces that are, in many ways that are better for introverts, and places to be able to provide a space where the introverts among us can also kind of learn that community, can be a part of those communities in ways that they wouldn't have done that before. And then when we are able to be back, kind of reimagining, okay, so then as an extrovert myself, how can I continue to look at ways that we're going to be more inclusive towards introverts? Are there ways and platforms that will still need to do some things digitally and on Zoom? And so I think it's been for me, that was really eye-opening to have that conversation the other day and to think about myself within that framework as well.
I appreciate what you said, Sarah, because we have a lady that has been coming to our Sunday school class. Mine is an older adult Sunday school class, and this young lady, to us is young, she's only 48. And I told her that all of the people in the class were old enough to be her parents, and she said, that's okay, I want to come, because she was interested in the speaker. And I thought how often we've talked about intergenerational groups within the church, but somehow when we gather in person, we let what we see prevent us sometimes from being in relationship with people and getting to know. It's like, oh, you're too young or you're too old or whatever it is. But in Zoom, it's a lot less noticeable. And so people just engage in different ways. And that young lady that's been coming to our class, I said to her, we have other Sunday school classes that we would share with you. And she said, well, do you care if I just stay? And I said, no, you are welcome to stay. But, at the same time, we want to make other options available. But I think it's been a time when people it's been easier for them to engage in different activities, and just as Sarah said, that they feel welcomed in new and different ways, and that's been good.
Joel had mentioned in the kind of front end of his response, real briefly, our devotional offerings, and I selfishly want to ask about those because I am interested and I have a vested stake. When we moved to Dispersed Church, I know that we worried about the spiritual well-being of our members with this disruption in their faith lives, and our ability to just stay in that regular connection with our church community. And so that was part of what motivated the development of our daily devotional offerings, our written daily devotionals that are offered up on social media and via email, and then our daily video offerings as well. I know all of you have written a devotional or 2 or 3 or 10 during this time. And as a communications person, writing is a regular part of my job responsibilities. But I don't think that it was really it was the other duties as assigned section of your job for this time. So I wonder how that process has felt to you, how that endeavor felt, whether you enjoyed it, whether you will be so happy to never have to write anything ever again when this is over. Like, what has that experience been like?
This is Belynda, and I think the experience has drawn me into deeper faith practices. When you write a devotional, that means just as in teaching, you have to be prepared and you become the learner. So it's given me personally the opportunity to spend a little more time with the scripture, give it a little more time on how it applies in my life, and then hopefully have faith enough that God will take the skill that I have and create that into something that someone else will also benefit from. And so I think it has been, again, a good practice for me. And now I look forward to it. I'm like, oh, that's my time of study. I need to write a devotional. So I try to do that once a week to play my part in that.
The first thought that came into my head when you asked the question, Caitlin, was guilty pleasure, because I love to write. And normally in a normal time, especially early fall, I would be out of my mind with planning kinds of more mundane kinds of things. But it is such a wonderful gift, actually, to have the time to be able to write. And so I've been accused of turning into a curmudgeon during this time because so much of the music ministry has had to go dark. This is the one area where, for me personally, I've really enjoyed it, and I've felt like it has really enriched my faith, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree. It's been so much fun. So one of my favorite spiritual practices is just noticing God in the everyday and being able to be present to what God is doing around and among me. And, whether that's through what I see with my kids, or, kind of what I see with interactions with other people, or hearing God through a book that I'm reading, that it's just really powerful to have that practice of, which is one of my favorite spiritual practices. And so then to be able to take that practice and to apply that directly. So to say, okay, I'm going to share this with the congregation. And then the beautiful part is then being able to have folks write you back, and the comments that are underneath the devotionals and the ways that they're shared. And, I remember kind of early on, I had to shift my focus from thinking about the devotionals and the videos. Sometimes they're just for our congregation in particular, like I might use a devotional to be able to share a bit more about a mission partnership, or kind of how we've been able to engage in a particular mission. And that's not going to be, something that my mom out in North Carolina is going to be hyped up on. Well, except my mom is a mom, so she's going to be hyped up on anything that I do, because that's how moms are. But then Larry, my husband, and I did a devotional about face masks and about the ability and kind of the way that that's a way to protect. And Caitlin had a fantastic job of writing some fun commentary above it. But that reached out to my congregation that I had served in New York, one that I had served in Virginia, some folks that I went to seminary with in Atlanta, and then other folks in Louisiana, another person in Denver, Colorado, so really being able to see how these devotionals weren't just for our local congregation specifically, but could also reach out and be a part of reaching everybody universally. So that I also had to start to think how, which audience is this one being geared towards? And how could I continue to kind of shift my own language or my own thoughts in that way, so that I wasn't only talking about Boston Avenue with some of them, but could talk, if there's some of the devotionals are about racial injustice. So how could I see that in a bigger context than just what's happening here at Boston Avenue as well? And that way it could be a part of sharing with more people. I know that I don't want us to quit them, because there's been super fun, and it's been a great way to really engage and to listen to and to hear God in the midst of a pandemic.
Sara, you kind of mentioned it when you discussed the mask devotional that you did with Larry. And you and Joel have both contributed to our daily video offerings. What has that experience been like, doing the video devotionals? And has your relationship with technology changed at all during this?
Oh, yes. My relationship with technology has grown a ton. It turns out that I had to learn some things with my phone, with kind of the best way to be able to do a video devotional. I also kind of learned I like doing them, so that it wasn't a strain on my life, that it was kind of a fun way of thinking about like a little miniature sermon in a sense. And sort of how could I, like I'm not always given the opportunity to preach all the time. And so, well, now I am in the midst of the pandemic with our shift to weekly worship with 13th Street, but it was still a kind of a little bit of a ways to have that little miniature space. Now I did have to learn too that my phone's a little bit older. So, I needed to learn about how to make sure that the sound was right all the time. And I had to think about lighting. I never would have thought about what's behind me. And so I had to think about like, okay, what's behind me in order to make sure that people aren't being distracted or what, what kind of, are there different images and different videos? And then I learned that I could send to Caitlin like little snippets of videos and she would put them all together and to make a really great devotional. So that really engages folks in different ways too, to kind of have different images and different people and different scenes that are happening all at the same time, are happening in different places and at different times. So that way it's also more engaging. So thankfully, having kind of a greater team around that as well, so that was something that even though I could be creative and could think through these different pieces, I didn't have to create everything. I didn't have to be the one to put it all together. I didn't have to have the eyes to be able to make sure that it looked the best. So that's been really helpful, that there are things that I can do, but I know that I'm just a part of a bigger team here at the church.
I mentioned a few minutes ago about turning into a curmudgeon, and then if I'm brutally honest with myself, having to rely so much more on technology has pushed me in that direction, because all I need to say about my familiarity and affection for technology is the fact that I got my cell phone at Quick Trip.
Yeah, you still have a flip phone, don't you, Joel?
Of course, yes. I have a very dumb phone from Quick Trip. That probably costs less than $10, but hey. So I am able to understand the value of technology, and I think for me, as I think you said it very well, Sarah, the challenge is finding the people who can do it and support the ministry. And my goal is to try and think of the ideas for the kinds of videos and the kinds of ways that music can be used, and to perform and to do it well. Making recordings, musical recordings, is challenging. Every mistake is memorialized. So part of it is, it's a real skill. It can take up days and days and days if you obsess about every single detail. And of course, you'll never get it all perfect. So being well prepared and doing it well enough to feel okay about is a challenge. But then I need to find other people who can actually do the technology part. And fortunately, we have lots of those, and so I'm grateful.
Joel, you made the comment about kind of a dark time as far as music's concerned, but I would just say to you that on behalf of all the people who are joining and participating with Boston Avenue, they are so grateful and overwhelmed by the light that the music shines in their life. They hear it. We appreciate so much the technology piece that enables us to reach all these people. I don't understand it. I don't understand electricity, but I don't have to, as long as we have good communications people. But I do know that the witness is powerful, and I like to say to people that it just is, again, a witness that God is bigger than all of this, and he brings people together as teams to make all barriers fall, and that people can still come together and worship together. It's just been phenomenal during this unprecedented time of separation.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been the Ascends at Boston Avenue podcast. Our producer is Alicia Urban. Our theme music was composed and performed by Wyatt Smith. Boston Avenue UMC is a progressive historic church located in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma. Please check out our social media for more information on what's going on at Boston Avenue United Methodist Church. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you.